I was standing in front of my mother's house on her 58th birthday, holding a cake in one hand and a gift I spent 2 weeks choosing in the other. For 8 years, I had been paying for everything in that house. The mortgage, the car, the insurance, every single bill. I never expected anything in return except maybe some appreciation. But that night changed everything. What happened behind that door made me realize I had been nothing but a wallet to the people I called family. Before we dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If you have ever felt like the invisible one in your own family, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. This story might hit close to home. Stay with me. My name is Burke, and I grew up in a small town in Ohio with my mother Donna and my younger brother Kyle. Our father passed away when I was 14 years old. It was a workplace accident at the steel mill where he had worked for almost 20 years. One morning he left for his shift like any other day, and by noon, two men in hard hats were standing at our front door with their heads bowed. I remember my mother collapsing on the porch, and I remember holding Kyle, who was only 10 at the time, trying to explain something I did not understand myself. After my father died, everything changed. My mother became a different person. She was tough on the outside, rarely showing emotion, but I always believed she loved us in her own way. She just did not know how to express it. Kyle, on the other hand, became the center of her world. She always said he looked the most like our father had his eyes, his smile, even his stubborn streak. I looked more like her side of the family, and somehow that seemed to matter. Kyle was the one she held close. Kyle was the one she protected. I was the one she expected to step up. And I did. I stepped up in ways I never imagined I would have to. I worked my way through college on scholarships and student loans. Nobody helped me fill out those applications. Nobody drove me to campus visits or sat with me during financial aid meetings. I figured it out on my own because that was what I had always done. After graduation, I landed a job in financial accounting, and over the next 8 years, I climbed the ladder slowly but steadily. By the time I turned 32, I was a senior financial analyst at a large firm in Columbus earning about $130,000 a year. It was a good life. I had earned every piece of it. But somewhere along the way, I became the family bank. It started about 5 years ago when my mother called me crying, saying she was behind on her mortgage and did not know what to do. I drove home that weekend, sat down with her bills, and realized things were worse than she let on. So I took over. I set up automatic payments from my account for her mortgage, which was $1,800 a month. Then came the car payment for her Toyota Camry, $450. Then the insurance for both the car and the house, $320. Then utilities, about $250 depending on the season. Then I added her and Kyle to my phone plan, another $160. Then I put her on my health insurance plan through work, which cost me an extra $580 a month. And somewhere in there, I started paying for Netflix, Hulu, and a few other streaming services, because Kyle complained he was bored. Add it all up, and I was spending close to $4,000 a month on my family. That is not counting the random loans Kyle would ask for money. He swore he would pay back, but never did. A few hundred here for car repairs. 1,000 there for an emergency I later found out was a weekend trip with his friends. It added up. It always added up. But I never complained. I told myself that this was what family did. This was what my father would have wanted. I was the older brother, the responsible one, the one who made it out. It was my duty to take care of them. At least, that is what I believed. The first time I really felt the sting of being taken for granted was about 2 months before my mother's birthday. It was my own birthday, my 32nd. I had taken the day off work and driven 3 hours from Columbus to Youngstown to spend it with my family. I did not expect a party. I did not expect expensive gifts. I just wanted to sit down for a nice dinner, maybe have some cake, and feel like I mattered to someone. When I walked through the door, my mother was on the couch watching television. She looked up, said hello, and went back to her show. Kyle was in his room playing video games. He did not even come out to greet me. There was no cake, no card, no acknowledgement that this day meant anything at all. I waited an hour before I finally said something. I mentioned that it was my birthday, trying to keep my voice light, trying not to sound like I was begging for attention. My mother looked at me with genuine surprise and said she had completely forgotten. She promised we would celebrate the following week, maybe go out for dinner or something. That dinner never happened. The following week came and went, and nobody mentioned my birthday again. I drove back to Columbus that night, feeling emptier than I had in years. A few weeks later, Kyle called me asking for $3,000. He said he and a friend were starting a business together, a mobile car wash service, and they needed capital to get started. I was skeptical, but Kyle sounded so enthusiastic, so determined. For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe he was finally ready to grow up. I transferred the money the next day. 2 weeks later, I found out through social media that Kyle had taken his girlfriend to Las Vegas. The photos were everywhere: fancy hotel rooms, expensive dinners, club tables with bottle service, $3,000 gone in a weekend of partying. When I confronted my mother about it, she told me to calm down. She said Kyle was young and needed to have fun sometimes. She said money could always be earned back, but memories were priceless. She actually said that to me. Memories were priceless. As if the money I worked 60 hours a week to earn meant nothing. I tried to set boundaries after that. I told my mother I would continue paying the essential bills, but I was